Hey, B2B leaders, feeling stuck in your growth journey as you've exhausted all your plays? Tired of doing things the same way and not seeing results? I'm Stacie Sussman, your host, and this is C-Suite Strategies, your podcast for the explosive business growth you've been chasing. We'll bring you conversations with industry visionaries who've truly mastered the art of scaling businesses. This isn't just theory, it's what we live and breathe every single day. Get ready for game-changing insights that'll transform your approach to business growth. Whether you're a seasoned C-Suite executive or an ambitious founder, we've got you covered. C-Suite Strategies is your backstage pass to reaching that next level of business. Follow C-Suite Strategies now, and let's make this your new reality. Hey, Pod Squad. Super excited to have you for another episode of C-Suite Strategies. We are with another special guest today, a dear friend and former colleague, an amazing all-around person, Jennifer Yousem, founder and CEO of iHeartEBITDA. Today, we got a good one for you, and I know I always say that, but they just keep getting better. So the story today is the numbers, how financial data reveals the truth about growth. We're tackling one of our favorite conversations, marketing, sales meets money. Too often, we see CMOs stay focused on the messaging and the ICP and the storytelling, while Jennifer and people on her team are very focused on the data, the forecasting, the margins, the numbers. And when you zoom out, both sides are telling the same story. One's talking maybe in words, the other's talking in numbers. And as Jennifer and her team will probably say, the numbers always win. So we're super excited to have you here, Jennifer. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about iHeartEBITDA. It is an outsourced bookkeeping practice, controller, and fractional CFO advisory service business that helps mid-market companies turn messy numbers into meaningful growth insights.
I mean, how can I even follow that? As you said, I'm the founder and CEO. And after spending a lifetime in corporate finance for, as I like to say, poorly run media companies that I'm sure you've all heard of, I left corporate to bring that skill set to the mid-market because I really felt like there was a gap between what smaller companies were getting and what enterprise companies were getting. So we do that on an outsourced basis through bookkeeping, controller, and fractional CFO advisory services.
So Jennifer and I met at the Daily Mail. We say it was loosely a decade ago. We're dating ourselves. And Jennifer what was your official title towards the end of that stint?
Head of finance for the U.S.
So head of finance for the U.S. She was the one. We were in sales, or I and my colleagues and I were in sales, and Jennifer was the one that was like making us all these cool calculators for our commission checks and yelling at us and telling us if it's not in Salesforce or it's not in the CRMs, we're not going to get paid, and sitting in those forecasting meetings and your heart is pounding as the sales rep and is like, when is that Macy's deal going to come in? And you say next week for about 6 weeks now until they finally get the IO. And so that's how Jennifer and I met. But I quickly realized she was a powerhouse. She, of course, knew her numbers and, really was trying to grow the business at the other times while some of us were kind of running around with our heads cut off trying to make things happen. So talk to us about your background, and let's go media first because just that's how we met each other. So we met each other at Daily Mail, but I have some thoughts on what patterns were you seeing? If I stand correctly, at Daily Mail, we were loosely about a $30 to $40 million AR company in the U.S. specifically. I was there for the third U.S. start that ended up sticking. And so what patterns do you see in media companies? Because now we run both our own companies. And I was like, I wish at that time in media, I had these tech tools or this access to this knowledge or these resources. So from a financial number standpoint, what do you think if we were to take a time machine back 10
Huh.
years ago, what could we have done better?
Well, I think, you said something just now that really resonated, which is there's a number of different ways to measure growth and success. And one of the biggest issues that I've found with many companies, but particularly in media and advertising, is they measure success on top line growth. And there's so much focus on what I consider to be vanity metrics.
Our favorite word.
Yep. And to me, top line growth doesn't mean that much.
Why?
Means
Tell us more.
because you could be making $1 grillion, and if it's costing you $2 grillion to make it, you are losing money. So as much as top line growth is a measure of growth, because I built calculators for the sales team, I'm highly focused on margin and really focused on managing, basically operating expenses, because those two things have to move in concert with top line growth. So I know salespeople get super hopped up on I just closed this deal. And I'm like, at what? What is that costing us? They're like, oh, I only gave away an extra 10 million impressions. It's totally fine. Don't worry about it. With just zero regard for the fact that those 10 million impressions are going to cost the entire IO. So
I have
there are
been
a lot of ways
part of
to
those deals.
Yes. And, I think when a lot of companies are starting out, media aside, everyone says, I'm sure you think back to the beginning of your days when you started RevUp, we say yes to a lot of deals. We
Right.
just want to get it in the door and get it started. And so I don't knock people for maybe taking some loss leaders in the beginning just so they can have proof of concept. But if we're a few years in and that's still our strategy, we have a big problem. Big.
Yeah. So I always talk to our clients at RevUp Advisory about the concept of sort of leading and lagging indicators, the concept that, we can look at maybe pipeline and forecasting, but as you know, being the finance person, if all of our pipeline moves to the next quarter or the quarter ends up being Q4 and it moves to the next year, that shits the bed, to be frank, as to
Yes.
how we're going to make our numbers. So what does that mean in your kind of business?
I'll tell you. And I think, one of the reasons why I was pretty happy to leave kind of, I would say, enterprise, corporate, whatever, large companies. There is always a forcing mechanism top down of what we should be hitting.
Right.
And it creates that false sense of, what it generally drives bad behavior. Got to get the deal in, whatever. I think if there was more honesty, and I think you can hold people accountable, but still say, listen, the reality is I'm not going to hit this until Q2. I would rather be having that conversation in, Q3 of the prior year than constantly, on a weekly basis being like, when is this going to close? But don't have it sitting at 90% for 3 quarters. Stop it. It's not going to hit. We know it's not going to hit. You have it in there so that you can escape the wrath of your CRO. And that doesn't serve anybody. So what I find is when you're dealing with the middle market, there tends to be a lot more honesty.
Yes.
And you can, and quite frankly, on an outsource basis, you can be a lot more honest.
Yes, you can.
That you can when you are, a C-suite and you're involved. You're getting pressure from a lot of different people to say the right thing and make sure that PowerPoint presentation has the, up and to the right. but it's just not the reality because it's, it's craggy to get there. So
Yes, I love that. We often talk to our clients, and we are often the ones that, I would say, are the ones that have the tough conversations with our
they're my favorite.
clients
You know,
that are like, you don't have enough qualified leads in order to make your pipeline. And if you're not making Q4, we've now missed the number for the year. And if we have a 30% push year over year, but we didn't make this year, how are we getting to a 30% plus the deficit of this year? So this is a real scenario that we see all the time.
and it's a horrible cycle, right? Because you start your budget planning in August, and generally the finance team knows at that point we're not hitting the year,
Right.
but we are basing next year's numbers on a false forecast from this year. So we've now set ourselves up for failure once again in the following year, and it's really demoralizing. And I think once you get everybody aligned to the truth, and listen, I'm all about a stretch. I love a stretch. There's reality, there's stretch, and there's, are you fucking kidding me? And all I'm trying to do is avoid the latter. Like, right. Hope is not a strategy. Let's be honest about the market, our pricing, what we really think is going to happen. And then, let's set some realistic, stretch goals on top of that, but with strategy behind them.
Yes.
Like with an actual strategy, not just hope and a prayer.
Yes. And we love that because, like you said, if you're in your August planning for the next year, you already have the first half of the year to see kind of where we're going. Or August, you're more than 50% through the year. So why do companies then, and I saw this all throughout corporate, give a stretch goal sort of over what we didn't hit, and then we're now into the next year, maybe we're like a quarter or two in, and it's like, oh shit, we got to lay off some of our employees, or we got to scale back our talent because we didn't hit the numbers. But guess what? 6 to 8 months ago, you knew you weren't going to hit the number, and you could have avoided this with growth strategy, attribution, better outreach, less money on sponsorships, less money on ads.
We can start with honesty. Just being realistic about market conditions and forecasts. I don't know what I've seen a couple factors that happen. A couple of companies that I've worked at, there's a bottom-up budget, which is people asking for too much money because that's what they do. Money for resources, staffing, tools. I can't do my job unless I have X, Y, and Z. Okay. Those are always over asks. And then you've got the bottom up strategy of revenue, which is inevitably going to be sandbagged so that somebody can look like a hero at the end of the day. Okay. So that's what's happening in the company. At the board level, at the investor level, at the whatever, there's a push. When we signed on to this deal, you said it was going to go like this and it hasn't. And why aren't we seeing that? And you're saying 100 million, but when we invested, you guys were supposed to be doing 150 to 200 million. So that's what I want. Awesome. Let me just wave my magic CFO wand and make that happen. So I think that's where a lot of the disconnect comes from. And I'm not sure how, unless everybody is really intellectually honest, which it's nearly impossible, that you can get to a place of like a real true forecast.
Which marketing channel closed your last 3 deals? How much did you spend? And what revenue did it generate? At RevUp Advisory, we help CMOs prove marketing ROI with real attribution, connecting campaigns to closed revenue. We create strategic alignment between marketing and sales teams. And yes, we know the buzzword. We're using agentic AI too. If you're ready to show pipeline impact and scale with revenue predictability, contact Stacie Sussman, CRO at RevUp Advisory. Yes. And I believe in truth, honesty, and transparency. And that's one of our big values at RevUp Advisory. I'm sure it's one of yours too at iHeartEBITDA. And if we were honest with the data and the numbers, and then honest with telling the story that maybe we are going to get there, but maybe it's not the hockey stick 18 months. It may be this ebb and flow that happens over, let's call it 24 months or something like that. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is running a better business than this consistent hockey sticking that then has all these false starts and stops and scale backs and scale ups.
Yes. And I think, again, the only thing that you can control, really the only thing in your control, are costs. That is it. You cannot control revenue, right? There's a client could leave tomorrow. They could go bankrupt. You may not get, the market reception you thought, there's a million reasons, but you can always control your costs. So I always take a very aggressively conservative approach as opposed, listen, that's in my nature. And obviously that's why I do what I do. And I'm probably, salespeople have to take a very different, right? Very optimistic, whatever. And I think that tension is great, but somewhere in the Venn diagram of nervous conservatism from the finance side and, this ridiculous optimism on the sales side needs to be some intellectually grounded conversations in the how behind or the why behind the numbers. And that's why I'm so focused on financial storytelling. Cool, you think you're going to do 100 million next year. You're doing 60 this year. Convince me, get me
the numbers.
With numbers. And if it comes from a blend of hey, we think we're going to land these 5 huge accounts. Here's where we are with them. Here's the likelihood. Last year we were able to land 7. We think 5 is realistic. Awesome. I'm going to support your forecasts in a million ways. But if you're I don't know, every other company in our space is growing 30%, so I don't see why we can't. No. Not going to do it. Hard pass. Not going to go. No.
So when you say operating costs, and just for our listeners here, what are some big bucketed items? We don't need to nerd out totally here, but what are some big bucketed items here? Because I find, and you've done this math with me for RevUp Advisory, it's yes, you can bring in all these deals, but how much are you paying your talent and your people? What is your tech stack? Are you doing education, computers, technology? What are some of those buckets that you need to think about? Because if you're getting $1 million deal, like you said, and you're spending $2 million to get the $1 million deal, that's actually not a great win for the company.
No. So there's, 2 things to think about. For me, the easiest way to think about what an operating expense is versus a cost of goods sold or what goes into actually, if you have to write a check for something, regardless of whether or not you have revenue coming in, that is an operating expense. Rent, insurance, salaried employees. Now, you do have a little bit of leeway with those people, right? I guess you could always term them, but if you think about the fact that those people get paid whether or not the $1 million deal comes in the door, what people don't factor in, particularly in, I would say, to your point, service-based businesses,
right,
is if you're banking on a giant deal to come in and you don't have the resources in place, right? Software you can buy tomorrow, right? That's unless it's like a, long implementation time. But
We can fix that for you.
yeah, there you go. If you need to factor in, if that deal closes tomorrow and you need 5 people to service it, you don't have 5 people,
it's a problem.
Right. So then what ends up happening is you end up overpaying for the resources, even if they're contractors, because you're so desperate to get the deal and get it done. So you may have factored in like a 50% margin, but because it was super last minute and because you needed to, get something done, now you're paying 75%.
Yes, that is so important. We do it the opposite way. We build our projects with Rev Up Advisory with our bench, and we staff people on the project as we're working through the proposal. So we actually know sort of what the margins will be. But I hear you, and tons of people do it the other way.
Right. And some people will say, they'll get offered something like an add-on project. Like, I'm sure this has happened to you. Like, hey, I know this is super last minute, but could you throw on X, Y, and Z? Like, you have a choice in that moment to say, yes, I can service this piece of business in a way that's going to represent Rev Up in the best way possible. And maybe I'll have to overpay a little bit on the costs, but it's worth it to me. Or maybe you'll say, I don't have the resources in place to be able to do this. And if I tried to get them, it'd be a loss leader for me. So I'm not going to do it. But the yes mentality, like, not all revenue is good revenue.
Did you hear that, folks? Not all revenue is good revenue. That is spoken like a true CFO right here.
Yes.
So then that brings me to my next question. When these C-suites are bullshitting you, and we can say that because we're on my podcast, how do you know when the bullshit meter goes up? And how do you know when the numbers don't tell the truth? Obviously, I would say if they are an iHeartEBITDA client, it's very easy for you to pull up the bullshit meter and say, no, that's not actually true, because I could pull up your spreadsheets and I can tell you while it's not true. But if you're starting to, work with a new client or bringing in a new company, or you're having that like disco of like, are they going to come in and be like a good fit for us as a company? What are some of the questions or areas you'd want to like poke into to understand? Because for us at Rev Up Advisory, we often get asked to do projects, and it's not exactly the project that they need. And so what I do is have a lot more discovery calls up front and say, we'd actually like to do a baby project or a growth audit so I can understand what they're saying, but I need to validate some of their hypotheses and assumptions about the business in order to charge an engagement that actually will yield us revenue, the good kind of revenue. And so how do you know that when you're talking to new companies?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the first things I'll ask when I'm coming in as, fractional CFO is, why now? Like if it's a company that's been around for, many years, why now? And the answer is almost always the same. It's, we've plateaued in some way, shape, or form. Or, right, I mean, that could mean our revenue isn't growing, or it could be my revenue's the same, but my cash isn't. So it's some reason there. And I will ask them why they think that is, right? I can't grow revenue, so bringing in a CFO doesn't really make sense. And they'll say, almost always, something doesn't feel right. Okay, you've been in this business for a long time. I get that. There are sometimes as a CEO, you're just like, the math's not mathing, or something feels off. Okay, gut is great. So that's when we can like kick the tires on some things. We'll look at margin degradation. Maybe
What is margin degradation for those that don't know?
if you have been delivering the same product year over year and you have not increased your prices, but the price to deliver that product has, and on a product-based business, that's easy. You buy something for $1, you sell it for $2. Now that thing costs $1.50. You're obviously making 50 cents less. Where it creeps a little bit more, and we certainly see this in service-based businesses, and we definitely saw it in media, is if people don't think about the fact that if you're giving raises to people along the way, if every year you're giving people, let's say, a 3% cost of living increase, and you haven't raised the prices of your standard offerings by 3%, you are going to see less money. Like,
You're in trouble.
right, exactly. So what I see a lot of times, particularly with founders, CEOs that have been in their business for a long time, in their mind, they have an idea of certain metrics in their business, but those metrics are usually like 2 or 3 years old. So I'll say to them, well, what's the average margin on X? And they're like, oh, it's 50%. I'm like, do you do post-game analysis I know, I've been doing this a long time. Then we start to do it, it's closer to 35.
It's a problem.
That is a problem. And a lot of times they're like, no. Go back to your abacus and run your little spreadsheet again because it's 50%. And I'm like, boop, boop, boop. Oh, nope, still 35.
You heard this, folks. This is a very important point with Jennifer's magic abacus.
Yes. Like, numbers don't lie. It's one of the reasons why I went into this discipline, why I'm so comfortable in it. And so if somebody has an idea about their business, if they can prove it to me,
Great.
right. Like, great. The numbers should back up whatever story you're telling in your head.
Yes. I always say with RevUp, we're implementing forecasting and dashboards and pipeline reporting. And then they go off to, the magical board and tell them some sort of narrative with the numbers. And I always say, I can lay my head on the pillow at night because I gave you the true numbers to the best of our ability as to what was in the systems and what the data told me. If you want to see your numbers go up, down, up, down, up, down, and that's the company, you should tell that story. But if you are now telling that hockey stick story, and that is not the numbers I have RevUp, and I'm sure your team has given to them, and they want to do some Houdini magic in the boardroom while my earmuffs are on,
right?
I can't control what that looks like.
I always say, tell me why. Your margins, let's just say, your margins have been 35% consistently for the past 18 months. You are forecasting them to be 50%. Help me understand what's going to change. Oh, you're swapping out 2 junior people for a senior person who can get twice as much work done, and the combined price is, only 50%. Great. That is a great explanation. But if you are telling me that the history of your business, and I'm not saying that historicals are 100% indicator, but
You're
you
looking
gotta
for
walk me-
patterns.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big believer. You just have to walk me through what is going to change. Like I said, we'll talk to people and they're like, well, I'm going to bring on, 10 new clients. I'm like, oh, okay. But last year you brought on 3 and the year before you brought on 4. So if nothing's changed, still you, what's changing next year?
They need a growth strategy plan in place to get them there. But if they
they're
don't
like,
have
I just
that,
know it. Hoping a prayer. Like,
not going to work.
it's not going to work. So all I will say to people, you may not like the hard truth that I'm telling you, but if I'm asking you to defend it. And there are a lot of times, sales, particularly with sales teams, they'll say, here's what my pipeline looks like, here, whatever, which is why those weekly meetings to gut check close dates. And right, if I see something moving 3 weeks in a row, it's coming out.
In Jennifer's world.
Right. In my world, it's coming out.
In our sales world, it's there for 6 to 8 weeks.
Right. I would be happily wrong. I'm happy to have a deal come in. I think people think, because of what I do and the way that I deliver things and how very just direct I am, that I am not rooting for the company. I am rooting for the company, but I'm being honest. Like, I don't want that ever to be, I want to be wrong.
Right. Okay. We're very focused on the marketing departments because I came from the sales side of the house and I'm an operations nerd and I love technology. And the CROs and the sales team and the CFOs, although we have this back and forth dialogue of, are we going to hit the numbers? When is it going to close? When is it not going to close? Are we talking 3 weeks versus 6 versus 8, which changes quarters and years? The conversation can be had and we can sort of have a friendly agreement, disagreement to come to some sort of agreement. What I find on the CMO and marketing side of the house is we need $50,000 to sponsor something, or we're going to do this activation in Cannes Lion and it's going to cost the company $300,000. And then I at RevUp say, well, how can we prove the marketing attribution? We've spent X, we've spent $300,000. Did that net us a deal? And is the deal $50,000 or is that deal $2 million? Because that changes your margins. And then in Jennifer's terms, you got to factor in how much did you spend producing that activation, and did you fly talent and hotels and all that kind of stuff? And now you're taking people out of market. But the CMOs are not as comfortable with this storytelling in the numbers because they just want things and say, well, we're going to bring you more leads or more deals. At RevUp, we quantify what that looks like. Mm-hmm. But why do you think the CMOs have such a hard time kind of having a seat at the table with these numbers?
To be honest with you, I think it's for the same reason that I am not going to get up with a storyboard and try to explain the magical story of the, I think everyone's got their skill set, right? I live, breathe numbers. It's where I'm comfortable, whatever. That is not, or historically has not been I think the outcome. And so what I love today is that a lot of this is kind of melding together, right?
Love that.
There is more, now they have more data to support initiatives and ideas. And I also think you're right, there's a shift.
Yes.
From the way that things used to be done, to your point, giant sponsorships and, whatever, to other types of things. So one of the kind of shifts that I'm seeing that I really like is, instead of asking for the, I would say, ROI on each individual thing, it's aligning everybody at the budget process to what is our purpose for next year? Is it views? Is it margin? Is it maybe it is just top line growth at the expense of everything else? That's a very different discussion. And I understand that that's a strategy sometimes. Hurts my heart, but I do get it. So I think if everybody's kind of aligned at the beginning as to what are we truly trying to deliver and get at. So that's number one.
Yes.
And number two is this idea, and I'm seeing this a lot more, where they're giving marketing departments a budget at the beginning for the year.
You have to slice the pie.
You figure out I don't want to have this conversation every time a new opportunity pops up. You need to decide. So I think it's a little bit of that way. That doesn't feel like, you're constantly asking your parents for money.
Right.
It's more of, here's what you have to spend. And I love that frankly, for any department. I love that for, HR. I love that for operations. I love that for anybody. You have to figure out the best use of your resources to achieve the goals of the company, not the goals of the marketing department, not the goals of the finance department, but what are the company goals? And I think that, to your point, all the new technology, all the new tools available are enabling at least some. I view it as like a translator between departments that speak different languages. I can't speak, this really, this logo really, you can feel I don't know. Show me a good spreadsheet in Excel, obviously not Google Sheets because I'm not an animal. Show me a good Excel worksheet and so if we have a universal tool that can tell us like, this is driving this, that's driving that, which is I think what you bring to the table is like this translator so that we can all speak our own languages, but still be delivering on the one promise that we all decide is important to the company, whether on an annual or a quarterly basis.
Yes. And that's what we do at RevUp Advisory. We align the marketing and the sales teams, and we are best friends also with the CFO and the operations because we want to say, what are the goals for the company and how are all these departments going to achieve the goals? And the old days of everything being siloed, and I came from media where it was very advertising and sales, and editorial were very church and state. Like that can't exist anymore, even in big corporates, even though I'm sure it still happens. But in these mid-market companies, this we mentality is so much more powerful than this I mentality. And this is what we do at RevUp Advisory. And I know I'm on your website, iHeartEBITDA.com, and it says forward thinking finance without the BS. And that's why we always are constantly referring each other and having these insightful conversations with each other because we do believe that all these pieces need to come together because the goal and what we both want to see is revenue being boosted and so the company can grow.
Yeah, but maybe not. Like, no. I'm being dead serious because I think this is like the crux.
I want to see the company grow.
Well, no, but the crux of everything, there are a lot of ways to grow. So we're working with a company now that has been at kind of steady revenue for quite some time. And for a number of reasons, they've decided that that is the right place for them to be. So their focus, like in order to go to the next level of revenue, requires resources, time, energy, and money that quite frankly, they're not interested in.
Yeah, that's true.
We had a very frank discussion and said, if you like your work-life balance and this is working for you and this level, how do we extract more money out of the business at this revenue? So like, again, it is a very different marketing strategy.
Very different.
Right. So is cash the focus? Is margin the focus? Like, and by the way, no right answer. Top line, again, many companies lose money in the beginning because they are just taking everything that comes in the door. And I have no issue with that because a lot of times you're trying to figure out what the right ICP is, whatever.
Product market fit. Yep.
Right. Or you extend yourself and you don't, whatever. But if you are years into your business, there are different, we have different strategies depending on the quarter, depending on the year, depending on where we're at. I just think that everybody has to be aligned.
Alignment is spoken like the best word we can ever hear. Obviously, we are focused different pieces of the business, but that is a excellent point. I would say as we wrap this episode, and I hope you guys are listening till the end because this is some important stuff right here. She just gave a really serious example of a different growth strategy that you should also be thinking about for your business if that aligns. How could people get in touch with you? How can they contact you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Definitely check out our website, iHeartEBITDA.com. And there's a wealth of resources, on there talking about the difference between operating expenses and margins and tons of really good nuggets. And yeah, you can reach out via the form on the website and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. And we will link that in our show notes so you can reach out to Jennifer. Thank you so much for having this conversation on our pod. Data and financial acumen is definitely a big one as we are working in, not Google Sheets, that breaks my heart, but spreadsheets, and we work in systems. So for those of you still listening, thank you, Pod Squad. And we will see you in the next episode because your next big business breakthrough may be a conversation away. As we wrap up this episode of C-Suite Strategies, I want to express my sincere gratitude to you, our listeners, for tuning in and engaging with our podcast. Your commitment to business growth and operational excellence is what drives this podcast forward. A special thank you to our guests today for sharing their valuable business insights and experience. Your wisdom is a gift to our audience, and we're honored to have had you on our show today. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you follow and subscribe to the podcast. Your help supports us to reach more ambitious business leaders just like you. And if you didn't enjoy it, well, I guess I'll see you never. This is your host, Stacie Sussman, Chief Revenue Officer at RevUp Advisory, signing off.